Welcome back to kinser'skeep.
It's been a while since we took a classic cocktail adventure, so let's investigate the Sazerac.
And with such a complicated history, you're definitely going to need something to sip on. Perhaps some Sazerac rye whiskey? Cheers. Let's get into some history.
The Sazerac is a legendary drink that in 2008 was made the official cocktail of New Orleans. However, its true origin story is elusive, and how to make a true Sazerac is a black hole of contentious debate. So where do we even start? Well, there's a lot to cover. From Sazerac Forged Fee Cognac, Antoine Peychaud, the Sazerac Coffee House, to the Sazerac Company that still operates today, and the Sazerac House. To really get to know the Sazerac, we need a little help. The Oxford Companion to Spirits and Cocktails, edited by David Wondrich and Noah Rothbaum, goes into detail about a trailblazing, yet fact-altering drinks historian Stanley Clisby Arthur. He put out a book called Famous New Orleans Drinks and How to Mix Them, made a lot of errors both on accident and on purpose, and made this whole episode really complicated.
Arthur claimed that in the 1850s, Creole apothecary Antoine Amédée Peychaud mixed his own bitters, a red bottle still known today as Peychaud's Bitters, with Sazerac de Forged Fee Cognac in his shop on 123 Royal Street in the French Quarter. The drink was named after the cognac and served to masons in an egg cup that looked like a jigger. The egg cup was called a coquette, and there's a whole tangent theory about how that word possibly got mispronounced and warped into the word cocktail, making the Sazerac the first cocktail, which is just not true. According to Arthur, it became a cocktail special at the Sazerac Coffee House, located next to the Merchant Exchange. The cognac was swapped for rye whiskey in 1873, and absinthe added around the same time. But unfortunately, most of this is just a twisted theory. Saloons and bars were called coffee houses, but I'm sorry to tell you, the Sazerac was not the first cocktail. Peychaud's bitters were far from the first bitters, and the word cocktail was being used in the late 1700s, before Antoine Peychaud ever came on the scene.
New York Sunday Mercury articles from the 1840s introduced iced cocktails as being compounded of brandy, sugar, absinthe, bitters, and ice. So the Sazerac House wasn't the only establishment selling Sazerac cognac and Peychaud bitters, or making cocktails similar to Sazeracs. The Sazerac was first mentioned in print in 1895, which brings us to Vincent Murret, who was a bartender and co-owner of the Sazerac House in the 1890s. Murret had a reputation of being the best mixer of cocktails in the city of New Orleans. He added maraschino liqueur and Angostura bitters in his Sazeracs. Hopefully that gives you a sense of freedom next time you choose the bitters to put in your Sazerac. Then in 1885, traditional French cognac was replaced with rye whiskey after Europe's phylloxera epidemic.
Somewhere between 1895 and 1899, the Sazerac House, owned by Thomas H. Handy, sold a line of 6 bottled cocktails. But there was no mention of a Sazerac cocktail until 1901. Different versions of the bar's recipe were being made all throughout New Orleans, and not long after, around the country.
Even though many cocktails were created with absinthe as a matter of course throughout the 1800s, it was demonized and made illegal from 1912 all the way until 2007. During that time, it was replaced with herb saint as well as other anise-forward liqueurs. In 1919, Thomas H. Handy & Co. became the Sazerac Company right before Prohibition took effect in January of 1920. Looking at the Sazerac Company's website timeline, it seems that a French restaurant and deli were how the company operated until the end of Prohibition in 1933, when they got back into the liquor business.
Then, the Sazerac Company had a bar again, along with a lunchroom, a wholesale headquarters, as well as a bottling facility in New Orleans. The trademark for the Sazerac cocktail was renewed, and it was bottled and sold. From 1940 to 1944, there was an ad campaign for the famous Sazerac cocktail, available only at the Sazerac Bar at 300 Carondelet Street. That location closed in 1949, And the Roosevelt Hotel made a new home for the Sazerac at its Sazerac bar, and it's still there to this day. The Sazerac company continued to grow, launching vodka lines, acquiring the rights to Peychaud's bitters in 1970, followed by different brands of whiskey, vodka, and schnapps. The company then moved on to acquire distilleries in Kentucky, launching Buffalo Trace in 1999, partnering with Old Rip Van Winkle in 2002, and even purchasing the Bowman Distillery in Virginia in 2003. Which brings us to one of my favorite moments in the timeline in 2006, the launching of the Sazerac Rye Whiskey brand, with an 1880s bottle in tow. Since then, the Sazerac company has purchased Southern Comfort, reconnected with its Forge at Fille Cognac roots by acquiring the Brill de Segonzac distillery in France, and once again distilling Canadian whiskey at Sazerac's Old Montreal distillery. Which brings us to 2019, with the opening of the Sazerac House in the French Quarter. So without further ado, I'm going to make the recipe an old friend from New Orleans taught me, with herb saint, a sugar cube, Peychaud bitters, and Sazerac rye whiskey. Let's make it. First things first, let's grab our mixing glass. And then we're gonna throw in a sugar cube. But before we do, you don't necessarily have to use a sugar cube. You can use simple syrup, totally fine. And if you do, aim for a short 1/4 ounce. I honestly ditch the cube more often than not, but it's a good opportunity to learn a new technique that's also super easy. So, using your hands or tongs or whatever you have, grab a sugar cube, put it right in the bottom. Now, to break down the sugar, we need bitters. In this case, Peychaud's bitters. We're gonna add 4 heavy dashes of that right on top of that sugar cube, if we can aim right. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we can't forget just a baby splash of soda water. Aim for about a short 1/4 ounce. That's it, that's all you need. Grab your muddler and muddle. Now, some of this stuff is gonna be a little bit stubborn, so you're gonna wanna keep circling the muddler around so that you make sure you break down all that sugar. I'd say that's pretty good. Moving on to our Sazerac Rye Whiskey. This whiskey is an all-around hit with notes of cinnamon, vanilla, honey, and black pepper. It makes a heavenly Sazerac, and it's under 30 bucks. If you wanna use a different rye, go for it. There's a plethora of Sazerac-worthy rye whiskeys to choose from, but I'll stick with this one. 2 ounces right in the bottom of your mixing glass. Boop, 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 boop. We're pretty much done. How easy is that? So let's grab a couple scoops of ice and then stir for 5 to 10 seconds. Now we need a chilled whiskey glass. Perfect. Now we're gonna spray this down with herb saint. I put some herb saint in here, and we're gonna squirt it 10 times, or at least until it drips. Perfect. Absinthe is the way to go, but herb saint is the reason I fell in love with Sazerac, so we're gonna use that. Now, all we have to do is pour our Sazerac in the whiskey glass, and we're done. You can strain over ice if you want, but this cocktail doesn't call for any ice. And coming from an ice lover, it honestly doesn't even need it. So, we're just gonna garnish with an optional expressed lemon peel spear, and that's the Sazerac. Now for the taste test. It's definitely a close your eyes and sip kind of a drink, so, oh wait, we gotta smell it first. We gotta let you know what's on the nose. It's like the perfect amount of star anise and lemon. A little whiskey. Let's see what it tastes like. Get a little bit of the cherry and the clove from the bitters. A little sweetness, not too much, which is surprising because there's a whole sugar cube in there, right? And then it finishes off with this just like perfect rye kick Sazerac. It's just delicious. All right. Taste 2. Okay, now I taste a little bit more of the herb saint. I think it had a chance to open up from the dilution. A liquor rep once told me to taste things twice, at least. That way your palate's ready for the second sip. And I think they're right. It made all the difference. To be honest, I just don't like licorice, and which is surprising, right? Because I love this cocktail so much, and star anise and licorice are almost identical. So I feel like I'm kind of reconsidering that whole relationship. You should honestly give this cocktail a shot, even if you're like me and you don't like licorice. And when you're making it, just remember to make it the way you want to make it. Till next time. Cheers.